Hello everyone, Mike Levin, August 7th, Monday morning, 2016, around 9 a.m. There's the Empire State Building up in the clouds. I shall take the tourist route this morning. I don't mind it too much, and I shall shoot video this morning because it is kind of drizzling. My YouTubing definitely goes up during the nice weather summer months because it's easy to hold my arm out in front of me like this. And that is the primary driving force for when I'm either YouTubing or podcasting, which is the other thing I've sort of taken to. But my rambling style, my daily thoughts as I go into work or am coming from work on that commute, which has a 20-minute walk each way, giving me plenty of time to do this, comes off better when you get all the other information around me as I walk. I think people like the New York aspect to this. And if you do, great, I might as well ramble. I'm a suburban kid from Philadelphia, the burbs of Philly, called Lafayette Hill. And that's on the outskirts of Philadelphia when you take the Schuylkill Expressway. I guess it's west, going towards 202, the other expressway out there, where they meet up at a place called King of Prussia or Valley Forge. I guess the largest claims to fame of that area are the fact it was, Valley Forge, where George Washington camped out. And the other thing is, I guess the original IKEA was in Plymouth Meeting there for a while. That was a little bit of notoriety, and Plymouth Meeting was close to where I grew up, Lafayette Hill. And now a lot of these little communities out there where I used to live are becoming really hip places, as I guess people want to get more power for the dollar of where they live, and they're willing to live with a little bit of a commute in and out of the city where the jobs are, or out there in the burbs. Sometimes the jobs are in the burbs. I did the reverse commute out to Commodore Computers. So the unusual aspect of this neighborhood was that, it was the near Philadelphia suburbs of Commodore Computers. So back in those days, little do people remember, but with Commodore having bought the Moss Semiconductor Company, a Norristown-based chip manufacturer who had created a clone of the 6800 chip from Motorola, in fact a little bit too close, the 6501 they called it, and later on created a less infringing version, the 6502. So this was a company founded in part by a guy named Chuck Peddle, astoundingly, I believe, still alive gentleman who is living perhaps in Sri Lanka or something. His actual high-tech career seems to be paralleling Arthur C. Clarke's. Travel to some other country where you live like a king from your bit of notoriety and perhaps help some society who needs it. So I admire these folks, people like Arthur C. Clarke, who defined all these visions, and people like Chuck Peddle, who brought the Patsy-Tatsy, $300 a pop microprocessor down to the $25 a pop range. And people forget today how big of a deal that is. That is the difference today between everything having to be some sort of 4-core i7 costing, $3,000 versus everything that we carry in our pockets that, is about $100 these days, really. I mean, I'm sure the quality and value that goes into it, especially like the iPhones, are worth much more than that, and the telecommunications companies are offsetting it with the, lock-in service contracts But nonetheless, phones that are these miraculous little satisfying devices are, you know, a quarter, fifth, a tenth of the cost of desktop computers. Might not be that way anymore, but you know, you can still see that reflected today if you look at the really high-end stuff that people use for photo editing or movie editing versus an average phone. You are talking about the same split as existed between the, you know, Commodore 64 and before that the VIC-20 and the Radio Shack Coco computer and the Apple IIe. Actually, the Apple IIs were pretty expensive for their day, but you get the idea. There was a whole bunch of home computers that were basically based on the MOS semiconductor computer chip that Commodore bought the company. So Commodore, when it was one of MOS's largest customers, and Commodore put in such large orders and then didn't pay, throwing MOS into debt, putting them in a vulnerable position to a buyout, takeover, which Commodore did. So instead of paying their bills, they bought the company. And suddenly all these companies like Apple and the equivalents of Apple in Europe of its day. In the UK, there was a company called Acorn Computers. They all realized that Commodore was becoming the IBM of its day in the home computer market, because not only did they put out the most popular models of these, you know, $200-300 computers, but they also owned the company that provided the chips everyone else had to buy to be in this market. Otherwise, you're on the you know, Intel style chips, and you know, it's $1,000 just to sit down at the computer, which is actually, you know, Atari had put in so much quality into their components and into their system that it was getting close to that with Atari also in its day. And as I later gradually learned, the connections between Atari and my beloved computer platform, the Amiga computer, run deep. There was great overlap of the talent, if not the number of people, then the team leaders, the spiritual drivers. So specifically Jay Miner, the hardware designer of some of the chips that went into the original Atari 2600, was also the driving force behind the Amiga computer that had such miraculously ahead of their time coprocessor system for all kinds of tasks that computers needed to do that generally burdened the CPU. So these tasks get disconnected from the CPU. Perhaps the CPU's only duty is to check in on it every once in a while, which takes a fraction of the resources of actually like chugging memory around and video memory to move pixels on the screen. So they made glitter chips to take care of that, and they made chips to take care of all the I/O between the different devices. And you know, the video stuff was really kooky on, I guess the Ataris had it, but also the Amiga had it, with what on the Amiga was called the copper chip, where they could change resolutions on the fly on a line-by-line basis because of the way horizontal screen builds were done on computers and how fast memory switching between different bit planes of memory was on the Amiga. And suddenly you had the ability to program far, far ahead of its time stuff, as we Amiga fans really knew by that smashing boing ball that bounced around and you grabbed the screen and you pulled it down. So this was always kind of like a secret weapon kind of thing that Amiga people felt, if not for the constant crashes. So it was superiority in computing that blew up in your face every once in a while. And so you not only had a superior tool, but you disqualified yourself for all the grown-up jobs where 100% uptime counted, and you had to have a sense of humor about it. And that very much sort of helped shape me I was the perfect Amiga fanboy for the time. So I latched up with Commodore, which was astoundingly in my backyard, and I had a couple of friends who made sure I never forgot that fact. Ed Flacco and Mark Rifkin, who, you know, were much more part of the Commodore scene than I was in those days, but I managed to get my first Amiga and got that badass feeling that Amiga people got and gravitated immediately towards the Amiga OS, its version of, say, a ye old version of Linux, a lightweight Linux, I would equate it to. Although everything's subtly different, but all the main Unix and Linux concepts you can see there, piping, you know, input and between, you know, piping standard input and output between commands, inter-process communication. It was really quite astounding how elegant it was, and it going away was a huge loss because muscle memory, investment, and in an alternative universe where the Amiga reigned supreme, I'd probably be somewhere very different in my career right now and not in SEO. I am in SEO because the Amiga went away, and my heart had to reside somewhere, and I tried hanging my hat on the Microsoft, you know, or throwing my hat into the Microsoft arena. Got to get my metaphor straight. But after a brief time of absolutely loving VBScript, or Visual Basic Scripting Edition, or the watered down version of Visual Basic that Microsoft made for admin purposes to have a better shell script than Unix, which was adapted then for the web. That's what VBScript was, which a lot of people came to know as active server page, or they are those files with a .asp extension. So I tried to embrace that world, right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Plant my flag in the Microsoft camp. Whoops. Well, that didn't work out too great. So I experimentally tried all kinds of different things. I really threw myself into Java, and I had one of the more popular Java tutorials out there when I used to have an old domain, mike-levin.com. But I abandoned all that because I basically hated Java. My tutorial was how to, you know, zip a file to write essentially write back what you would use all kinds of scripts for today, but under Java, to archive zip files and put them places and to do directory manipulation. And I realized how ridiculous it was to do that under Java. The kind of overhead you incurred, and then lack of flexibility because of the compile process. It was back in the old days. But I gave up Java. I tried to jump onto the Ruby on Rails bandwagon, hated it because I had created my own generalized, you know, in their terms, you know, joyful frameworks, and their joy was different than my joy, and I found Ruby on Rails rather joyless. So I tried Ruby without Rails. No reason to do that, you know, for the lack of API support, and I flailed around a bit. I actually tried JavaScript before Node.js, believe it or not, and I investigated technologies such as Helma, which used the Rhino engine before the Google V8 engine took over everything back in those days. And I tried using JavaScript on the server just before Node, and abandoned that because, you know, finally my Python friends wore me down. They're like, what you're looking for is Python, let me tell you. Guillaume from one of the Commodore spin-off companies called Scala in Japan had told me about this as early as 2004, and I just was like, my mind wasn't there. I was thinking the same things as everyone else. Oh, Python, Snake, this is not, you know, it gives me a bad feeling right away. But I have to emphasize, and I cannot emphasize enough, that the Python of the Python programming language is homage to Monty Python. And you find many examples in the Python world about, you know, spam and eggs, the knights who say knee, you know, parrots, and it's a lovely, humorous, you know, admittedly slightly different thinking, European, English, Scandinavian humor. It's different than the mainstream US stuff. I would call it the hyper button-down literal, where people really love their statically defined variable types because it gives them some extremely snooty ability to look down on other people for not following best practices. And in fact, Python yielded on this and then started including a data type definition standard for Python that should not run unless variable data types are declared. And I think that's under Python 3.6 and above. I'd have to check my facts on that, but it's definitely been wrapped in. So if you wanted a large-scale Python project that had the benefits of, you know, every variable following the button-down process that Java and C people use, that Java people have to use, you know, out of design. In fact, there's languages called, I think it's Scala. In fact, another Scala. Yeah, I have Scala in my life 2 different ways, but the programming Scala, which I don't use, but it's scalar, you know, variables, and I believe it's tweaked out for super optimized tabular, you know, matrix style computing, the kind of stuff that people in the Python world would use NumPy for. And NumPy indeed introduces its own array object type, an extension of the Python data model, so that you can do very, very fast tabular calculations, the kind of stuff that I guess Fortran was invented for back in the day. So, you know, what am I saying here? You can just about heading into work. So, the point, do I bring this all home somehow? SEO, loveworthiness, what I'm doing. So, of course, I'm taking the next step in my SEO career, and I am in a situation where I have the really unique opportunity to work as an in-house SEO at the kind of place that really needs good SEO. It's probably part of who they are at this, you know, basic level, as it needs to be in the world of, you know, advertising and other related revenue stream publishing, right? If you publish because there's people who want to put ads up on that content, you've got a business that really could benefit by search engines sending a lot of traffic your way just by virtue of being the best published material on that subject matter, SEO. So, you know, my heart broken by the departure of the Amiga, my heart doubly broken by the departure of Microsoft Active Server page, and I'm in this, you know, won't get fooled again mentality, and dabbled here and there, tried really an awful lot of stuff. And finally, you know, after, you know, being on the edge of some really crazy explorations that could have taken me down the path of Lisp, because I felt myself subject to the Blub paradox, Google it, tried Python, been worn down, you know. Enough people told me enough things enough times where I'm like, okay, Python is what I need to look at, bam, Python was what I needed to look at. The primary person, the final, you know, person pushing me over the edge was Kevin Garrity from 360i, who used to be their VP of analytics. And, well, I was one of their directors of SEO, 360i, that, you know, Oreo, you can still dunk in the dark company, who helped define social marketing, real-time marketing. I was there through all that action and activity, But SEO was going through a strange, shall we say, not provided phase, and I had sort of like a existential crisis of, do I still even want to be in this career as the science is ripped out of it, by Google increasing its strength in the market, forcing you into Google paid product. Took me a while to say, yeah, that's the game I need to be in still. And I got to be in that game, I believe, or I want to be in that game, I believe, from the in-house side of the equation, where I'm practicing better Kung Fu, where instead of PowerPoints, I'm putting my time in on really smart optimizations. And now I see myself as optimizing instances of Amazon EC2, Elastic Computing Cloud instances, to make sure that I'm making the best use of having it at my disposal. Almost as much close to 80% uptime doing something, leaving enough buffer so that if jobs run long, things can shift and shape around. But that's it. Here I am about to walk in. I'm joining 2 jobs in the middle, one which was about 100% uptime scheduling on such a system, and the other which was about concurrent scheduling and a particular job. So these 2 projects are meeting in the middle so that I should be able to layer job after job after job onto the same EC2 instance and monitor its behavior constantly, probably using HTOP through TMUX. Looks like it's my most likely solution. So I'll run some monitoring things in that persistent terminal server. It's serving a terminal. Yeah, TMUX is interesting. I tried it for a while, got away from it, probably going to get back to it because I know it does certain long-running things that I'm not necessarily going to want in my System D or Circus D list of things being auto-run and scheduled. Yet I'm still going to like to check in on them every once in a while, run them, sometimes not run them, and that would be like, I believe it's called HTOP. But it's one of those resource monitoring programs, so I can make sure that everything's healthy on that EC2 instance. So I'm going all DevOps, but on one machine. That is the key here. That tears away all kinds of overhead that I would otherwise have to be dealing with, and I can focus on the application layer and the end deliverables where all the interest is at. So thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you soon. Don't forget to subscribe.